So, my name is Diana. I'm working at Shopify. You may have heard from me yesterday. I sometimes do Mac admin things and pretend that I'm still a Mac admin, but I'm in internal security at Shopify, and I lead security awareness. I'm here to plot the death of the end user. Metaphorically, we're not killing anyone. Let's keep everybody alive. If you're a serial killer, please stand up now and leave. No? Okay, we're good. We're going to carry on. So, what am I talking about today? I do a lot of talks on culture, and I always start by giving context into the values that we have at Shopify. Today is no different. I want to give you basically our values and why we want to build a security culture. Next, I'm going to talk about some considerations, some research I've done, some research I continue to do to build this culture. It is a very long process, and these are some of the tools that have helped me. And then finally, I, of course, want to give some key takeaways, basically just some of the things to keep in mind when you're building a culture, even if it's IT admin-related culture. I think these are still valuable, and I think you're going to get something out of it. So, Shopify. Short and sweet because Meg set me up real well yesterday. We are a platform, and we give you the tools to sell online, in person, out of the trunk of your car, whatever you want, and we are on a mission to make commerce better for everyone. Our numbers, over 600,000 merchants, including myself, so great, it's great, and in 175 countries around the world, and over 3,000 employees in 6 offices with a whole ton of remote people all around the world. So on top of the fact that we have all these things and people and things, we have some great perks, including beer on tap. But outside of the food and alcohol, we actually have some really great initiatives. This is one of the ones that I was lucky to be part of. It's one of our initiatives to build a more diverse workforce in 10 years, which is pretty crazy to think that we're doing this kind of stuff for 10 years from now. But this is Technovation, and it's an around-the-world competition. We had regionals, and we sponsored it for the last 5 years. And it's girls in middle school and high school building apps, pitching them for a chance to win prizes, as well as compete around the world. And I not only got to present my journey all the way from the film industry to security, where I am now, hopefully to inspire them into the world of tech and entrepreneurship, but I mentored one of the teams, and they came in 3rd. No big deal. It's fine. Let's carry on. So these are the kinds of initiatives that build sort of our internal culture as well. And, I mean, I'm sure we all have a culture at our company. It's extremely critical for us. We hire extremely talented people, and then we treat them like extremely talented people when they get there. And we grow very, very quickly, and these are sort of like the guiding stars, the culture values to maintaining an open workforce and growing as fast as we do. And one of the main ones that our CEO talks a lot about and is part of all of us at Shopify is called the trust battery. So if you've never heard of this before, it's based around trusting people to make great decisions. When you start at Shopify, you start with a 50% charge. As you make investments into working with people, making decisions for projects, so on and so forth, you increase that charge, and this keeps progressing, hopefully to 100%. And this helps us move quickly and make a large impact, and each individual person is trusted to do the right thing. It's not a real battery, though. Like, it's not like a metric we store somewhere in your file or anything. It's just intrinsic to the relationships that we have at Shopify, and everybody knows about it when they start with us. And so this is one of the main kind of values that I really want to cover today. Knowing this culture, you can imagine why I want to get rid of this security culture. If you've never seen this before, it drives me nuts. I post it every time I do a talk. This does not align with Shopify, and in my opinion, this does not align anywhere, but that's just my opinion. Negativity does not increase security. It makes people resentful, powerless, and quiet, and that's the worst. Because we trust people by default the way we do, and being part of the trust team, we're trying to maintain that trust and make it stronger. We grant a lot of access. That's what it really means to trust people. And that means that we need to know when things go wrong. And because we don't enforce a lot of controls, it means that we have a really large gap to fill with security culture, with educating people to do the right thing. So to stop this way of thinking, we have to start thinking about the way we all think. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about our brains. Drive is very complex. If you are interested in brains as much as I am, I have lots of references at the end, so you don't need to take notes. Everybody relax. I have a good reference slide at the end. Why should you care about this? Well, you and the people you work with are very talented. You're welcome. That's your compliment for the day. And they're experts in their craft. They were hired to do what they were hired to do, whether it was marketing, whether it was PR, whether it was design, whatever the case may be. What drives you and matters to you needs to be communicated in a way that empowers them to do the right thing and also doesn't feel like a chore, right? Like, the way we build tools is great and everything, but you also have to consider the way that everyone else thinks. And you need to take into consideration that willpower and motivation is actually a muscle. So I will give you an example. There was a study done, when was it done? 20 years ago, I think. I'll give you more context into it later. Details aren't important. There's a group of students that were put into a room that smelled like cookies because there was a bowl of cookies and a bowl of radishes on the table. The group was split into two, and one group was asked to ignore the cookies and only eat the radishes. And the other group was asked to ignore the radishes and eat the cookies only. After, I think it was 20 minutes or so, they stopped that side of the experiment and said, we'd love to get you to go through this puzzle, this very complex geometric puzzle. Little did they know there was no solution to the puzzle. So people persevered, worked on the puzzle. The people who ate the radishes, it took them about 8 minutes to give up. The people who ate the cookies, it took them about 18 minutes to give up. Yeah, it's weird. But I'm the anomaly because I love radishes more than cookies. I don't know why. It's just since I was 2, it's fine. You can sort of see that this proves that it's kind of a muscle, right? Like, the strain that you use to resist something like cookies actually impacts decisions you make later on. And there's been other studies around that determine strain as being very different between people. So somebody could make a simple decision about what they're going to eat that night, but somebody else may actually strain themselves more thinking about it. It is very, very different between people, and you need to be mindful of the fact that people's willpower does differ. And this sort of explains to you why timing is extremely pivotal when you're designing a security culture, when you're educating, when you're trying to ship, some of the initiatives that you have. If people used up their willpower during the day to do the job they were hired to do, they're going to have nothing left to give you by the end of the day when you ask them to update their operating system or whatever else. So I'm going to give you a tip. When something major happens, or a crisis, good or bad, at your company, outside your company, something that impacts you, take advantage of that time and take advantage of making something happen and rallying people for your cause, making something good happen for security. I read a really good book called The Power of Habit, which I'll reference at the end as well. And they had a quote that said, crises are so valuable, in fact, that sometimes it's worth stirring up a sense of looming catastrophe rather than letting it die down. And I'll give you some examples of kind of the stuff that impacted our trust battery and what we tried to do, initiatives that we tried to do to sort of make good things happen. We all remember Meltdown Inspector. This was a big impact item for us. People reported it to us constantly, which was great, open line of communication. They were concerned, but they didn't know what to do and they didn't understand it very well. So what did we do? Well, we built a security refresher course, tried to make it fun. This taught people how to report security incidents, and this taught people how to maintain device and identity security in sort of a more fun and engaging way. We also all talked about Stethoscope yesterday. Well, we built a Ruby on Rails app version of it, and I promise you, please don't ask me if it's open sourced. I will get it open sourced. But basically, it gives you the devices that you have and the tiers that I wrote to determine security of your device based on if you're traveling or based on sort of a baseline. And this web app covers a lot of different things, and some of them are automated through using Jamf, so on and so forth. Some of them are more questionnaire-based, but it gets people to think about their security level. And The intention of this is to gamify it more, which I'll talk about later, into dashboards where we can have leaderboards for our teams to compete against each other to get our numbers up, right, for OS updates, for everything else. The other thing that we also used was all the breaches that had happened in the past. People were extremely worried. They didn't remember what they had signed into, and they wanted to make sure that they had all the tools that they needed to maintain their security of their devices and especially their identities. So we taught them how to make strong, unique passwords for each account, once again in a fun way. And we also provided them a password manager for not only work but personal use as well, and educated them on how to use it. Another great thing we did was third-party app reviews. So we built this repo in GitHub. It's really straightforward. Submit an issue if you're using an app, even for Shopify data, and we gave them a questionnaire. How's the data being stored? Does the vendor have access? All that kind of stuff. And it got them thinking about data security, especially in the cloud, for the apps that they are relying on for their day-to-day. Super, super useful. And this kind of got pretty crazy pretty fast, like people submitting tickets, really being engaged. And it proved to me that people want to make a positive impact. They want to be transparent, and they want to be trusted. And if you give them the chance and the tools, they're actually going to surprise you. And if you're lacking content or ideas, there are some open source things out there that you can use. One of them being PagerDuty's security training that they open sourced. Quirky, fun, good stuff. And it's extremely in-depth. They have one for everyone, and they have one for engineers, which is even more in-depth. This gives you ideas, right? And it may not all be relevant, and it may be pretty long, but you can pick and choose whatever you want to use. And it helped me build some of the stuff that I have. So these kinds of initiatives, whether they're small or big, they create bursts of motivation in the people around you, especially when you're using them in a crisis. They make people care about what you care about. And it gives people the cues to change habits in their personal life and at work. And habit is an extremely powerful thing that is core parts of our behavior, which I'm going to explain because habit is so cool. So habit is the brain's way of automating tasks to save energy or save brain power. Without it, we'd lose all willpower at the beginning of the day when we, had to remember if we turned off the stove or locked the door or backed out our car. Do you remember when you did that? There's certain tasks that you struggle to determine whether you did or didn't that day. Those are your brain's way of moving things into the back of your mind and turning them into automated tasks. The thing to remember is that you can't remove habits, you can modify them. So you can turn, let's say, smoking into going to the gym instead to sort of get that high as well and get the energy that is the reward in this loop. And how can we really change habit loops? Well, we have to find cues, which is the first part of the habit loop, something that drives you to want to do something, run through a routine, which the routine is what you would modify, and get a reward that's sort of similar to the reward you were getting. One of the ways that you can do this is through gamification. I'm not talking about the hours I spent in God of War trying to unlock every chest. The fun and engaging elements of game design, using them in non-game context is what's really going to help you motivate people. And I'll give you an example. We all know LinkedIn, and this has been iterated 1,000,001 times, the profile strength progress bar. I was one step away from being an all-star. I think they called me an all-star or something. And I just needed that summary written and, good to go. Fine, I'll write it. I wrote it. It was just a sentence. It was great. It took me no time at all, and I got this cute little icon. Oh, look at that. That's so great. I felt so good because that was sort of this tiny little glimmer of unlocking something in a game. And it built intrinsic motivation within me to want to update other things on my profile. And so I did. I updated details, publications, all that kind of stuff of my own free will, right? It created this kind of ramp-up feeling. Another experiment that I ran is, as you may have heard of my trust coins, I brought these to MacDevOpsYVR this year, and I promised them to people who asked me good questions. And, Yeah, I got lots of questions. I think it was 20 minutes worth of questions. But they were actually really, really engaging questions. And not only that, it left a lasting impression with people in the crowd. And even Rich Troughton replaced one of his slides, talking about secure tokens, highlight of my day. And you could see that sort of, this was just about the engagement of the crowd. People, regardless of what they took away something that mattered to them in the presentation. And that was this tiny little tidbit of a reward. And so I brought the coins again today because, they're great. And I highly recommend you talk to me and ask me questions and, all that good stuff about awareness, jobs, whatever you want. It's fine. But I have some with me. Anyways, I could talk your ear off about social behavior stuff. There's lots more and lots of resources, but I kind of want to give you tips to ship some wins for security culture at your company. And for me, sort of leading it on my own, making meaningful progress is very difficult if it's this giant, thing you want to build. So I learned to treat awareness like a product. So a product is anything that you can offer to a market that satisfies a want or a need. And awareness being a product means that you can be very creative in the solutions that you build, and you want to sell them and iterate them over time for your market. You can sort of see why end users aren't going to fit into this way of thinking, because I want to build a people-centric product, right? I want it to sell itself. So if you thought this talk was about checking a box for compliance, I'm sorry to disappoint you. I will not be building a security training for that. But it is part of your product. It's a feature, right? And it's part of the many features that you're going to build in a security awareness culture. And for the most part, I think a lot of security awareness cultures start with the fact that you need security training. And when you're sort of thinking about the larger vision of building security awareness, make sure you create a feature backlog, and make sure that they're attainable wins, and make sure that you sort them based on impact. Like, what's really going to matter to you most? Extremely critical in being intrinsically motivated in a team of one. So what are some small wins that you can have? Well, automate everything. Automate everything you can. File vault encryptions. We automated two-factor on all our identities. Hopefully, that's something that you can do because it creates a security baseline for your company without being really a blocker to anybody. We used exclusion groups for a while for two-factor in case people didn't have phones or we had to provide them YubiKeys, so on and so forth. But it was a big win for us. Other things we did, we shipped 1Password for password management for everybody. We onboard people, we train them on how to use it, and then we even provide them personal licenses to use, family licenses actually, so more than one, which is awesome. People they don't know about them, right? So how can you expect them to make the right decisions if they don't know what they're doing, right? So this is a very simple way to implement more security in your environment. Other things, MDM profiles, providing things like screen locks, providing things like shortening screensavers, so on and so forth. These simple little wins, we don't enforce them. We have a self-service model, right? But that works in our culture. It leads people to do the right thing, and it helps them build their trust battery, right? It helps them charge it. And so, these are just some small wins, and I could think of more, but I'm at 18 minutes now. Jeez Louise. And it helps you build velocity, and it helps you narrow things down that you can't fix with automation. And for anything that you can't fix with automation, you need to turn them into metrics before turning them into solutions, right? Because you need to find a way to sell these things to your company as well. Why are you spending the time on building a security awareness culture? So metrics, quantitative metrics, things like phishing tickets, support tickets, how many operating systems are out of date at your company, so on and so forth. Those are really important, and they're an aspect. But remember, quantitative isn't enough. You cannot rely on just numbers because, for example, if you're tracking phishing tickets, right, you're at 500 per month or whatever, and you are also building a security awareness about phishing during that same time, that number is going to increase, and everyone's going to ask you, but why did I waste all this time doing this? But that's a good thing, right? Because an awareness program makes people more aware. And getting more tickets Maybe it could be a campaign-based thing, but it also may be because people are more aware of where to report these things to you. So they make good decisions, they report things to you, and some of these things are not quantifiable, how people feel about security, how people feel about, where to report things. So you need to also rely on qualitative metrics, things like doing a survey, like doing an actual form. Maybe you have a security awareness training kind of refresher like we do. Have something at the end where people can actually give you some feedback on how it went, what they hated, what they loved. Confidence in discerning phishing. There's lots of instances where somebody asks you, is this phishing? And your answer is only yes. They're going to keep asking you because they don't know what the specifics of phishing is. They don't know how to even tell. So why not think a step ahead and teach them how to help themselves? And some other stuff is like learning, the way that people learn. Do you know if people enjoy reading more than they enjoy watching videos? Or maybe some people like hands-on stuff? That's really important to figure out so you know what you're building and why you're building it. The thing to remember is also not to get lost in, completion rates for your security training, course or whatnot. You need to use things like a combination of how many issues were submitted, how many incident counts, how many incidents did you have, is that number being lowered, so on and so forth. And then combine it with something like the feedback form for security. Are people feeling more confident? Are they not? And then you can sort of like do a bit more analysis in there. This metrics chart's really great. I'm going to link it to you at the end. It's a combination of qualitative and quantitative metrics, and the intention is that these metrics help you sell your product and iterate it, right? So you go back to them, you use them to determine wins and losses, and you iterate to make a difference in your product. It's pretty straightforward. So the task is daunting to build a security culture, and I'm still going, and it's very exciting but very difficult on a team of one. So I wanted to give you some takeaways to remember for your journeys. And the first one is sharing. Sharing is caring, or whatever they say. I don't know, it's fine. We are a huge community of Mac admins, and I know that maybe some of us don't do security. Maybe it is truly IT admin kind of stuff, but I think that all of this is extremely pertinent. Do outreach programs. Like, don't just, I'm not talking about like posting on Slack or whatnot, but I wrote a security awareness course for seniors, and it was given to a group of ladies that were 65 to 80, learning about phishing and storing their passwords in, let's say, a notebook instead, because I'm not going to go teach an 80-year-old how to use one password. But it helps you think of a different way of communicating with people and what's pertinent to that specific age group. Sharing is super, super important. Next one, because I keep, praising this whole treat awareness like a product thing, thriving on feedback. Make sure you ask for feedback on things. You can really get lost in your mission of thinking that you're so great and you wrote this thing and it's making such an impact, but like you have no way to prove it unless you ask for feedback. It helps you determine what works, what doesn't, and it makes you and your company more resilient. Last thing, you're an expert. My other compliment to you all, I believe that you should all be mentors, whether within your company or externally. Be approachable. It's super important. Some people are not confident in coming to ask you for help. The intention is to solve security problems and find creative ways to do so for the long term. And it means not reprimanding or making people feel ill-equipped. And so this is sort of my approach to awareness. And I don't think that there's room for end users here, and it's time to empower your humans. So thank you so much. I hope you got something out of it.